fastest show in sports.
Donald Trump has demanded from his presidential chair that the Baseball Hall of Fame induct Roger Clemens. And oddly enough, he does this the day after he plays golf with Clemens and Clemens' kid, and then Clemens comes out and thanks him. So they play this back and forth little love relationship between the two of them. He has a great golf game, which of course he's spending more time on the golf course than he is spending doing anything else, but that's another story altogether. But then he comes out and says Clemens in the Hall of Fame. No, absolutely not. Roger Clemens was guilty of perjury. Roger Clemens was mentioned in the original steroids report. He was mentioned by the trainer who talked about it. Roger Clemens was involved in the steroid era, and he never gets into the Hall of Fame. Unless, and Mike, I've even said this a couple of times, why not just at the Hall of Fame have a corner, a spot that represents the steroid era in baseball and says, these are the players who were involved, who were thought to be involved, and explain the whole thing to it. But baseball can't explain itself and really can't tell the story of the game until they admit that they allowed the steroid issue to happen. They covered it up. They tried to basically walk away from it because they knew it was helping the game. I mean, that goes back to the Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa time when we got more people than ever watching the game because they're launching baseballs out of every ballpark they touch. And baseball loved it. It was
and then you got
can't tell the history of baseball without telling the history of steroids.
Yeah, no, you're right. And there's still guys who use performance enhancers. The whole deal with professional athletes at that level is what I said before, is you walk right up to the line of these pharmacological gray zones and you figure out what you can take and what you can't that's going to ban you. Now, but let's be clear about this, because Jeff Passan of ESPN, who I respect as a baseball writer, he's been around for a while, and he's done great work. He's of the opinion that all these guys should get in because everybody used. That's not true. That not everybody used. Ken Griffey Jr. has never been accused or showed up in a Mitchell report or anything. He was he never used performance nobody ever tied him to performance enhancers in any shape or form. There are other great players that didn't do it. So what these guys did, and people look at it now as they just were giving themselves an extra jolt. No, Barry Bonds, when he got to the plate in San Francisco at the end, it looked like the bearded lady. It was like this big neck, and all the people in San Francisco at the ballpark were complicit because all they wanted to see was that little ball go into the water at McCovey Cove.
The fans were complicit,
and it was just sort of like, let's see that,
baseball,
right? They don't care.
They were all just going like this. Hey, look, another home run. Count the ticket prices.
Yeah,
Here we
and
go.
so
More
it's just
watching.
So Texas. But I was going to say, Roger Clemens is a Texas-sized fraud. I covered him on Capitol Hill during his appearance before a congressional committee. They didn't indict him. They didn't. I don't. Was he actually guilty of perjury in the court of law? Is he what? So either way, everybody knows he used. The fact that he never came out like A-Rod or Big Papi and said, yeah, it was not a good decision, but I did. And I was trying to keep up with the Joneses in my business, because that's what it was really about. All these guys after McGwire and Sosa realized and Canseco, the benefits of sure, if you can work out harder and longer, and you can hit and your warning track power can turn into grand salami power. Those guys. That's why they did it. But you also stole fame, wealth from others that didn't. You also gave a generation of kids that should not even be putting this shit in their bodies. You gave them an opportunity to go down to Mexico on these roid runs, where they go to Guadalajara and get some veterinarian grade stuff and come back and and then get on these withdrawals and kill themselves. You ever remember Bert Hooton? Remember that name? His nephew was a burgeoning pitcher. His father was Don Hooton.
Yes.
Okay. Don Hooton was his father. He hung himself. He was a big-time high school pitcher in Texas. He had a picture of Barry Bonds over his bed. He
I
thought that he was
actually,
doing what his
a
heroes were
long, long
supposed to
time ago,
do.
I actually went to Texas and interviewed Don Hooten and still stay in touch with him from time to time. And it was obvious even to him then when I interviewed him that his son was trying to, quote unquote, and paraphrasing, of course, keeping up with the Joneses. The kid saw that in order to do this, he had to jack up. And that's the one thing that you bring up that everybody always looks past in the steroid era. It's not even necessarily put aside for a minute all the tremendous amounts of money, all the fame and everything that a lot of these players made by jacking up and juicing up. Let's remember that there were kids watching them. And you know something, Mike, every time I've gotten involved in this discussion, I've had some people go, don't worry about it. Kids are resilient, man. You don't have to worry about it. The kids don't take that to heart.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. The kids look there at the
Yeah.
muscles, the home runs, the player who signs their ball. And you can always look at what they have. It's that residual effect of what athletes have on society. And that's the effect that they had, where they helped to turn a generation. And of course, somebody's going to say, well, prove it. I can't go out and do stats. I can only talk about what
Oh,
we've seen.
I could show you death. I could show you deaths that were related that were because of steroid abuse or there was a great story in the New York Times years ago about these Dominican young kids, teenagers that were in the farm system, and they tried to build their bodies up, and eventually two of them died. They had a big funeral in the Dominican. There was a huge deal about it, and they said that they got the steroids from the U.S. and different places. These were kids. There was a kid in Vacaville, California. God, I wish I remembered his name. Same thing. Wanted to juice up. Took him, got in on and off the cycle. So it's one thing if you have a synthetic chemist you can employ, and a person that actually tells you when to take them and when to not. It's still not
like Bonds did, and so many of the
technically
others
safe.
well, they all had trainers who were helping them. That's the whole Balcom.
Right. And so that's what it was about. These kids didn't. And so at any rate, that you get off the cycle and you go, and when you're an adolescent, you go through these huge mood swings. The steroid withdrawal exacerbates that, and a lot of these kids killed themselves, Ed.
Yes,
they killed themselves because they believed they believed that the answer to their athletic problems were going to be solved by the same things that their heroes were taking.
It's this is the same argument that I bring up all the time with Pete Rose. For many, many years, I said the same thing. Pete Rose, first of all, when they say he was not in the Hall of Fame, that's wrong, because Pete Rose, before anything else, was mentioned several times because of records. So his name was in the Hall of Fame for certain records he said. But I always said for years, Pete Rose gets into the Hall of Fame the minute, the instant, the second Pete comes out and says, I bet on baseball. I did it. I broke the rules. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done it. But Pete never came out and said that. He always obfuscated the point and tried to stay away from it. And yeah, maybe later in life he said, well, maybe I did gamble, maybe I didn't.
Yeah.
He never come out and admitted it. The steroid users just come out and admit it. It's like I covered the Boston Red Sox in their World Series run back in the early O's. And I mean, I got to be friends with all those guys, including David Ortiz. And I can't tell you how many times the rumors flew around the locker room about who was using, what was using, and why they were using. And I've had people say to me, well, you're a Red Sox fan. If you don't want Clemens in the Hall of Fame, and if you don't want Bonds in the Hall of Fame, then if David Ortiz used steroids, he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame either. And I said, you're right. It doesn't make a difference what I rooted for. You have to hold one accountable. You hold them all accountable. But here we have the President of the United States saying, don't worry about it. He might have he might have he might have influenced a whole bunch of kids later on in his life. He might have been a drug addict. Don't worry about it. You got to put him in the Hall of Fame. And here's a note, Donald. He can't go into the Hall of Fame until one of the new committees votes him in. He had less than 70% the last time that he was allowed to be in for a regular vote. They've got another committee that's going to come up, made up of unknown people who are going to decide who from a certain era gets in. It's not going to happen. You can't just stick somebody in the Hall of Fame by executive order. So stick the executive order right up your ass, because it can't happen. Do something else. Instead of worrying about Roger Clemens being in the Hall of Fame, run America, for goddamn sake. Do what's supposed to be done in this country and do it right.
Woo! Ed Berliner going political on us. All right, so before as we wind up that segment, I agree with you. A juiced section of the Hall of Fame is the way to do it. You just call it the steroid era, and you mention in a couple paragraphs that these players used. Though they played exemplary, they were under a cloud of suspicion, and later they were found out to be using those players cast aspersions over an entire generation. Some guys didn't. Some guys never went to the major leagues because they decided against the risks of health and their own careers and their own lives further on, because they didn't do it. And so those guys should be penalized? No. But you should mention that that's how they got there. And the sad thing with Bonds and Clemens, there's a lot of guys who use that you never heard of. Those guys could have never put a single ounce of the clear or the cream or anadrone or any of the big, powerful steroids into their body, or the syringes and the pills, and they would have made the Hall of Fame because they were that good.
See, that's always a good question, too, about Bonds, because when you look at Bonds and you look at his career before he juiced up, there are people who would say that he was a prototypical baseball player for his era. He had all the tools. He was a 5-tool player. And there's always the thinking that he would have gone into the Hall of Fame even if he hadn't juiced. I don't know. I'd like to think that that's the case.
Oh, yeah.
But
his numbers were on, I'm not a numbers guy, but his numbers were on par. Let's see, for all that,
Yeah, they weren't
and
exceptional, but
had he stayed
par.
healthy, he would have never been the fraudulent home run king. Hank Aaron still holds the title in my book.
It always comes down to the fact that there's other players who are out there. It's like Mark McGwire. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to over the years. No disparaging of McGwire. I've only met him once and interviewed him. But there's so many people who say that without the juice, Mark McGwire would never have been a star player. He just didn't have it. And so whether or not you become that because of the juice or not, I don't know. It's one of those great questions where we just suppose on and off. But at the end of the day, let's just say no. Clemens doesn't get in, end of story, move on.
That's all, folks.